When it comes to mythical creatures, the one that's always held the greatest fascination for me is the bloodthirsty, light allergic creature of the night, the vampire. I love vampires, to get the obvious statement out of the way. Now, I'm not an academic and certainly not an expert on the subject, so it's hard for me to pin down exactly how long ago the vampiric myth actually took root, but they have been a fixture in storytelling, especially horror, fantasy, and romance, since the early 19th century. And despite their signature undead status, their legacy is alive and well, as is their prevailing popularity in the world of pop culture and entertainment. For example, one of my favorite movies of this past year was Sinners by Ryan Coogler.
Y'all clean? Sure.
I'm a big fan of What We Do in the Shadows.
Look at the man.
God, not this fucking guy.
He is a vampire killer.
Hey, he is half a vampire. His opinion still counts.
Yeah, well, I'm only listening to half his opinion.
And Mike Flanagan's Midnight Mass is a genius work of horror. It is to this day the greatest adaptation of Salem's Lot we've ever gotten without actually being an adaptation of Salem's Lot. Robert Eggers' Nosferatu was like gothic immersion therapy for me, and Luc Besson's Dracula, A Love Tale was... certainly interesting. But when it comes to literature, if I see a piece of vampire fiction on display, I'm reading first and asking questions later. Case in point, here is a massive stack of books that I've compiled over the past month that all in one way or another revolve around vampires. I gotta put this down. And not to brag, but I think that when it comes to genre, I've really covered the full gamut here. We've got romance, horror, comedy, romantic comedy, crime, thriller, mystery, historical fiction, gothic fiction, science fiction, and I even have a cookbook here. So without further ado, let's dive into this list. And first off, we have what is the only book on this whole list that I've read, so I'm gonna get it out of the way first. This is Hungerstone by Kat Dunn. This was my absolute favorite book of 2025, and this just became available on paperback, so of course I grabbed it as soon as I could get my hands on it. It is a retelling of the Sheridan Le Fanu classic, Carmilla, the bedrock of the Sapphic vampire, and a book that I plan on doing a dedicated video for very soon. As I've mentioned it countless times in the relatively short window that I've had a YouTube channel, it just needs to happen. Now, there have been several reimaginings of the original novel, including An Education in Malice by S.T. Gibson and Carmilla and Laura by S.D. Simper, both of which I have read. I thought An Education in Malice was just okay. It's definitely not my favorite S.T. Gibson novel, but I do have a short review for it here on YouTube that I'll link in case you'd like to hear my thoughts and decide for yourself whether you'd like to give the book a chance. And I liked Carmilla and Laura quite a bit. It's by far the most faithful retelling, but it really spiced up the sexy aspects of the book to make it more palatable for a modern audience. And I really enjoyed it for that. Definitely a great Valentine's Day read. But in my opinion, Hungerstone easily reigns supreme for its wildly sexy and delightfully feminist spin on the Le Fanu tale. It explores all kinds of themes, from sexuality, liberation from societal suppression, parasitic capitalism, dysfunctional relationships, and personal identity. It's wonderfully written, incredibly fun, and one that I would love to see adapted for the screen. Please give me a Rachel McAdams Carmilla. That's all I'm asking for. Next up is Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. Honestly, you had me at the title. Now, this book was published in 2025, which means it's relatively brand new, and I'm kind of embarrassed that it was not on my radar. But I did end up hearing about it through the grapevine because a lot of people who read and loved Hungerstone also read and loved this. It's comprised of 3 sapphic vampire stories occurring across various periods of history, including 16th century Spain, pre-Victorian London, and modern-day Boston, with each story following a young woman who is navigating her own unique experience with immortality and bloodlust. I have to say that this book really called out to me when I discovered it. I don't know what it is about 2026, but it definitely has me in the mood for some good old-fashioned feminist rage. So Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil feels right up my current alley. I'm excited. Now, this next title is going to require me to make a little confession, which is I have never read An Interview with a Vampire by Anne Rice. In fact, I haven't read anything by Anne Rice. I know, I can hear the vampire fans recoiling in horror like I just shoved a crucifix right in their face. But if I may defend myself a little, I have seen the movie adaptation many, many times, and I had a lot of friends growing up who were massive fans of not just the Vampire Chronicles, but pretty much anything Anne Rice put her name on, to the point where I truly at times felt like I had read her work just through everything that they told me. But in truth, I haven't actually sat down to enjoy any of her work for myself, and I think it's about time that I corrected that course, especially when I'm dedicating an entire year to broadening my vampiric horizons. So as contrition for my lifelong sin, I will be starting with Interview with a Vampire. I am fully prepared for the mythos, the eroticism, and all the gothic melodrama it has to offer. Bring it on. And moving right along, this is the Southern Book Club Guide to Slaying Vampires, a horror novel by Grady Hendrix. Now, Hendrix is probably best known for his novel, The Final Girl Support Group, but he has several other books as well, and he's a very prolific writer in the world of horror fiction. This will be the first of any of his work that I've read, but certainly not the last, as I'm already planning to read The Final Girl Support Group for the Halloween season. And if I like it, and if I like this, then I definitely plan to add more of his library to my schedule. The story takes place in a small suburb outside of Charleston, South Carolina, which definitely sounds horrifying to me. Hey, I used to vacation there every summer. I'm allowed to say that. The book's main protagonist is a woman named Patricia. She has a workaholic husband who apparently works a lot. Wonder where that one's gonna go. She has kids who are more or less grown and not attached to her side anymore, and all in all appears to have a pretty mundane existence. The most exciting aspect of it being that she takes part in a book club that focuses on true crime novels, hence the title. However, Patricia's life is given a major shakeup when she's introduced to a mysterious and devilishly handsome man named James Harris, who comes into her life in a way that the back cover spoils, but I won't. The two end up striking a sort of, kind of friendship, maybe more, maybe not, with Patricia seeming to get a lot of fulfillment, or at least excitement, out of it. But around the same time of James' arrival, kids in a lower income neighborhood start to disappear, with the local police kind of dragging their feet about the matter and leaving Patricia to wonder whether this guy she's getting to know may have something to do with it, and if there's more to him than she may be prepared for. Now, I'm including this book on a reading list about vampire fiction, so it's anybody's guess what we're dealing with here. But predictability aside, I think the book is fully aware of how predictable this setup is. I have heard some great things about it. How it's a total page turner, has some really great social commentary, especially on gender roles, class discrimination, and racial division, and that it is surprisingly frightening.
You're right. You're quite right.
Now let's talk about Blood Like Mine by Stuart Neville. This is not a book that I went into the store with my mindset to buy. I had actually never heard of it, but while browsing the horror section of Barnes & Noble, I spotted it from a bit of a distance and immediately clocked it as a vampire novel. I mean, the cover certainly helps, but look at these pages. This is how you do sprayed pages, or at least I hope they're sprayed pages. Yikes. The story follows a woman and her daughter who are both on the run from the law, and the FBI agent who is currently pursuing them. Why? Because the daughter is a vampire who drains her victims of their blood, rips out their spines, and then discards the bodies, which now that I think about it makes her sound more like one of the infected from 28 years later. But the FBI agent who is following this trail of victims thinks he's dealing with the work of a serial offender, not a young girl, and certainly not a vampire. Now that's all I know about this book and all I really need to know. I love a tension-filled story where as a reader I can feel the clock ticking away as I grow more and more desperate to know how these characters are going to get out of the situation before they run out of road. And also I love a book that takes place in the American Southwest. Big Barbara Kingsolver fan here. This should be a fun one. Okay, now I feel a little funny going straight from a crime thriller to this next title, so be warned this could be a little jarring. Our next book on this list is My Vampire Plus One by Jenna Levine. Now I'll admit I'm a bit of a snob when it comes to romantic comedies, which if you couldn't tell is what this is. They just really tend not to be my thing. I find them predictable and irritating, unless we're talking something like 500 Days of Summer, When Harry Met Sally, or Notting Hill. And this is a book that I know would not have been on my radar had I not a couple of years ago stumbled upon Levine's first novel, My Roommate is a Vampire. That was a book that I found on Kindle and I started reading more out of curiosity than anything else, and then by the end of the night I had gone through the entire thing without stopping. Now I didn't think it was great literature and I can't even say that I would highly recommend it, but I would be completely lying if I said I didn't enjoy it. It was fun, it was romantic, and it had a sex scene that was pretty yummy, with the stakes being just high enough to keep me invested. I just realized what I did there. Oh my god. Please stand by. Reading My Roommate is a Vampire was like eating an entire family-sized bag of Skittles in one sitting. Not an ounce of nutrition to be had, but not a bad time at all. And that is ultimately what got me to check out My Vampire Plus One, which is Levine's follow-up to My Roommate is a Vampire. It's about a woman named Amelia who is living every woman's rom-com nightmare. She's attractive, she's incredibly successful, but she's single. No! What could be worse? Well, according to her family, absolutely nothing. So to get them off her back, Amelia decides to find a guy to pose as her date to an upcoming family wedding. She ends up finding a guy who seems
Practically perfect in every way.
except unbeknownst to her, but certainly not to the reader, he is a vampire who sees this wedding as a perfect opportunity to help him blend in as a human, which I can already hear the third act fight. You lied to me. You lied to me. Well, you lied to me worse. I'm not talking to you ever again for at least 2 days. This book has been described as witty, sexy, and purely escapist, which sometimes is exactly what I'm looking for. And I could totally see myself taking this outside on a nice warm day, book in one hand, mocktail in the other, and giving this a read in ironically the most direct of sunlight. Next up, we have the Gilda Stories by Jewel Gomez. This is about a young Black woman named Gilda who at the start of the novel escapes slavery in Louisiana only to be turned into a vampire soon after. From here, we watch as she navigates not just her newfound immortality, but the challenges of being a Black and queer woman throughout every period of history from the American Civil War up till modern day, which is a pretty extraordinary premise. And when I tracked down this gorgeous hardcover edition, that was the end of it. I mean, look at how gorgeous this is. No way was I leaving Barnes & Noble without it. I really do love when vampirism serves as a metaphor for very complex social issues. For example, as I mentioned before, Ryan Coogler's Sinners was one of my absolute favorite movies of last year that uses vampirism as an allegory for racism, colonialism, and cultural erasure. While here, it appears that Gomez actually spins vampirism in a more positive light to reflect personal agency and empowerment. I cannot wait to get into this book. Moving right along, we have The Buffalo Hunter Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones, an American historical revenge tale that tells a vampire story from an indigenous perspective, which sounds incredibly fascinating on its own, but honestly, as soon as I heard the author's name, I knew this was a book I needed to check out. Stephen Graham Jones also wrote the critically lauded The Only Good Indians and My Heart is a Chainsaw, and is very quickly becoming a household name in the world of horror. And if you're a fan of horror fiction, these are all absolute must-reads. Definitely go check out The Only Good Indians, check out The Buffalo Hunter Hunter, but don't go yet because now we're going to talk about Fledgling by Octavia Butler. I'm embarrassed to say that I had no idea Octavia Butler wrote a vampire novel. And not only that, but that it was her last novel before she passed away. It's about a young girl named Shori who is suffering from amnesia following an attack on her community that left her the sole survivor. But what she comes to discover is that despite her young appearance, she is actually a vampire and over half a century old. Now, what led to her vampirism, her amnesia, and the loss of her loved ones is what I imagine the entire crux of the story revolves around. So I'm going in as cold as I can. Octavia Butler was and remains a powerhouse in the world of fiction, and so I feel completely safe having nothing but the highest expectations for this. Now, I was actually just about to start shooting this video when this next book was recommended to me on TikTok, and I am so glad it was because this list would not be complete without it. This is Sunshine by Robin McKinley, a post-apocalyptic fantasy novel about a young woman who gets captured by vampires and is chained in a dungeon with another vampire who I imagine is from a rival tribe or clan or something, named Constantine. And that's just the setup. I don't know anything more about it, and I think that's for the best because I am totally hooked by the premise alone, and I am beyond psyched to get into this mystery. Now on to what is far and away the most highly recommended book on this whole list, The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. Now, I actually picked this up a little while ago, and since then, I've had at least 5 different people on 5 different occasions tell me that I absolutely need to read it. So it was great to actually be able to report that I had a copy on hand. I briefly talked about this book in one of my library haul videos, but I purposefully didn't go into any detail because I was saving that for this video. The book is described as a historical thriller with elements of fantasy and gothic fiction, all very much in my wheelhouse. It's part epistolary, meaning that it's told in the form of letters or diary entries, and combines 3 different narratives to tell the story of the multi-generational hunt for Vlad the Impaler's tomb, as well as his connection to the infamous character Dracula. That is really all I care to know about this plot. This is a mystery and one that I want to see unraveled as I read it, definitely not before. But one thing that I do want to mention is that not only did it take Elizabeth Kostova 10 years to write this, but it is her debut novel, which I think is incredibly impressive just for how big this thing is. She was apparently inspired by the stories that her father used to tell her about Dracula from the time that she was a kid. So it's clear that she has a very deep-seated passion for this and did a ton of research to put this together, and I am so excited to read it. Now on to what is the last novel on this list. Not book, but novel. This is So Thirsty by Rachel Harris. I'll admit that when I was in Barnes & Noble and saw this for the first time, I didn't think much of it and just kind of brushed it aside. I didn't think it looked or sounded bad, but it just didn't really grab me. And I think that's partially because for some reason I didn't clock the fact that it was a vampire novel, which with a title and a cover like this, I don't see how that's possible, but I don't know, maybe I was tired that day. But luckily, ever since then, almost as part of some weird universal intervention, I have heard this author's name popping up a lot. I've seen at least 2 different books in the past couple of weeks where her recommendation is on the cover, and these are books that are getting rave reviews. And that intrigued me enough to give this a second glance and ultimately grab a copy for myself. Now, I'm planning a trip in the near future, and this seems like the perfect book to bring along with me to read on the plane. It's about 200 pages, it's very brisk, and I'm sure that I could actually get a good chunk of it read before I land. It's about a woman who is more or less stuck in an unhappy marriage to a complete of a guy. Not spoiling anything, this is all on the back cover. And for her birthday, her husband decides to gift her a trip. Not with him, but with her free-spirited, free-living best friend. Which, big mistake, my guy, you've basically just handed your wife your replacement. Or at least that's where you think this would go if it were a romantic comedy. But no. This is a horror novel and a survival story about 2 friends who have to pull together, stay alive, and reflect on all of the events and mistakes that have led them to where they are now, captured by a group of bloodthirsty vampires. Sounds intriguing, I'm in. And last, but certainly not least, this is Elvira's Cookbook from Hell, written and prepared by the mistress of the dark herself, Cassandra Peterson. Now, Elvira is one of the grand gothic icons of all time, and so of course these are all recipes revolving around monsters, vampires, and horror. And when I saw this, I was like, oh, I know what I'm doing come spooky season. A little insight to me, I am a massive foodie. I love food, I love to cook, and getting to prepare new recipes for me is just as much fun as actually eating them. So I thought this would be so much fun to read and cook my way through over the Halloween season. And maybe I'll even film it. We'll see. And with that, my vampire reading list of 2026 is now complete. At least for now. Who am I kidding? It's definitely gonna grow. As I said at the start, vampires never go out of vogue, so it's bound to happen. But in the meantime, thank you so much for joining me on another book chat. Please make sure to like and subscribe so I can keep creating fun new videos where I talk all about my deep, dorky love of vampy fiction. Also, don't be shy to leave a comment, and please feel free to make a recommendation or several. My love for the literary undead knows no limits. Thank you again, and good evening.